My first slide, I've intentionally not chosen Dublin or Barcelona. This is Melbourne, Australia. I just wanted to select a high quality modern metropolitan area. I think modern economies tend to are favouring large metropolitan areas where financial capital, human capital is centralised, probably because the world is becoming more complex and it favours the sort of aggregation and concentration of assets and technology and so forth. And where does that leave basically a large town, small city like Waterford? How do we compete in this environment? I suppose we're very conscious of ourselves as being representing a category of urban area, a smaller urban area, and there'll be many, many examples of cities and towns like Waterford across the country and across Europe. Well, we can compete based on our competitiveness and our low cost base, rents and wages and so forth. We can compete on the basis of our quality of life, but also very importantly, we can try and maximise the assets we have, our history, and this is where the public realm comes in. It's a very important component of presenting ourselves. Waterford until recently was basically a kind of an island. The road infrastructure was incredibly poor. That's turned around in the last 5 years, the new motorway. This opens up great opportunities for the city in the years ahead, but also it's a challenge because as easy it is for people to come and visit Waterford, it's also easy for us to lose, for instance, retail spend, evaporate out of the city up to, say, Dundrum or whatever. So we really have to try and up our game and compete. Waterford is transitioning from a sort of classic port manufacturing, sort of post-industrial landscape into kind of representing itself, reimagining itself, and this is the silos on the North Quays that are actually, this is a very recent photograph. They were derelict for a long time, presenting a terrible, really, image for the city, and they're slowly coming down. And it's looking into the next couple of years. It's a great new opportunity for expanding. The city is very actually, it's asymmetrically developed on one side of the river, and we hope to sort of address this and rebalance development north and south of the river shore. So this is where we were about not so long ago. That car reg is 00, but probably taken about 2001, 2002. This is the main drag, the main retail drag in the city centre. As you know, the classic sort of photograph of the car dominating. There's probably, if you count the number of people in that photograph, it's probably only 8 or 10 or 15. And when we started to look at the city centre, 2000 was really our first sort of major effective urban renewal scheme. We started to ask the questions of, how do we make the city centre, the public realm, fit for purpose for the next generation? I think cities tend to, generally they don't sort of go at an even rate of change, but go through sort of quantum leaps, and I think that's sort of what's happening in Waterford now, where we've sort of made a sort of a jump into a new way of thinking of the public realm. And this is a classical Greek city that I know quite well. We go visit very often. It's Thasos in northern Greece. But it always strikes me when I go there, this is Agora in the middle of Thasos, is the sense of seamlessness between the public and private, the indoor and outdoor, all the facets of human activity, the commercial, religious, social, the art, for instance, the whole square is suffused with public art. There's just this sort of seamlessness, and also how they very carefully dealt with things like detailing of the water. Presumably they didn't have gutters in those days. The water cascaded onto the public realm. So the water channels are beautifully detailed, and the gullies is an underwater drainage system. We've been kind of one of the positive aspects of Waterford city centre is that we don't have any major arterial route bisecting it. So that's given us a great opportunity to sort of create a new public realm, sort of quantum that is very, very very pedestrian friendly. And I'll show you how that works in a few slides. But apologies for the quality of this, but it's a kind of composite of, it started off said around 2000. There's a major body of work ongoing, just started actually, which will bring us to about 2018. So essentially over nearly a 20-year period, we've had a fairly consistent marching direction as to how we conceive of the public realm. We did originally some of the schemes in-house. Now they've been done by various consultants over the years, and we've kept to a kind of consistent marching direction. So one of the themes I just wanted to sort of organise the talk around is using the public realm for storytelling, how you relay the sense of place that the public realm is almost a vehicle for. The history of any urban area is obviously layered, complicated, can be interpreted in any number of ways. So the public realm can be used to try and order it and explain in maybe in a logical fashion what makes our place special. Many visitors now, the informed, culturally curious, for instance, that type of visitor, they actually want to know, not in a sort of Disney sort of vibe version of history, but they want to know, in a more serious sense, how the place came to be, how the city has the form it has, but also that's appealing to the younger age cohort. And this group is the reenactors, Viking reenactors from the city. So you can convey the story of the city through reenactment, through visually, through tour guides, all the different senses. And you need some kind of backbone to any kind of sort of design endeavour. So just concentrating on the more historic part of the city, what we've done is we've basically developed the historic quarter by developing 3 new museums, and there's a sense of museums without boundaries, so that we've tried to merge the indoors and outdoors, so that as you move, the museums are arranged in chronological sequence from the Viking, medieval to the 18th century to modern museum, chronologically along the town wall. And the idea is that you move indoors, outdoors, and you see outdoors, you see it within the museums, you see the objects, see outdoors, you see the actual buildings and streetscape that relates to the various periods of the museums. So there's a kind of a structure there, an organising structure. And this is how it related on the ground. This is an early diagram showing some of the museums, some of the historic buildings, and looking at how people could move from building to building and across the streetscape. And already this diagram is getting more complicated. The arrows are moving in more throughout the rest of the area of the historic quarter. This is a tour guide, a very good tour guide, Jack Birchall, taking people around. What's important, I think, here, what I want to convey here is if you look at the street, until about a number of years ago, this was a classic street with footpath, curb, carriageway, curb, footpath. We've been sort of almost pedantic in removing curbs from the whole city centre. It's now, by 2018, we'll have removed probably all distinguishing between the footpaths and the carriageway. So we have a flexible and fluid and easy to transit public realm. There's an increasing number of large-scale events in the city throughout the year, and these events have their own type of dynamic where you're trying to move large numbers of people easily through the city, and cater for people all ages, all degrees of disability or ability, and having a clean, uncluttered surface, it certainly facilitates this. And notice the drainage channel, the simple, clean way of dealing with the water. Visually, building up the story of the city. This is a Viking longship, an exact replica, mixing up with the. Okay, I'm going to start moving quickly then. I just put a lot of we've taken a very a pragmatic view to public art, so that it tells a story, again builds the storyline of the history of the city. That's Aoife and Strongbow, cannonballs. This is Thomas Francis Marr, who brought the tricolour to Ireland back from France. That's building a storyline. This building was where it was first flown, 33 the Mall. John Condon, the youngest soldier to be killed on the Allied side in the First World War, bringing history that was being forgotten about. This young man had been forgotten about. Now is part of the historical fabric of the city. Signs, visual, instead of street names, we have signs on the buildings which relate to the actual activities in the buildings historically. The stand chair, the wine merchant. Trying to convey the history of the city to all age groups. Here we have children in the Medieval Museum building the city walls, to an older age group showing the model of the city. And this is outdoors for visitors who are moving around the streets. This is a bronze model of the city. Quality signage, tactile, such that there's medieval coins set into the glass. And then telling the story across scale. So this is an original object found in a dig in Waterford. Here she is, a Waterford lady, medieval lady on the pavement, and here she is writ large on the Medieval Museum. A modern sculpture as well. And the second thing I wanted to look at was the actual when you take away the carriageways and this classic division, how do you reorder the space? And reveal its inherent potential? So you're looking at how do you reveal the basic qualities, the sort of spatial qualities of the space. How do you reveal its the potential for creative use and reveal its history as well? This is again the Viking triangle. The yellow in the original was the original open space. All these other, the tan colours, all these other spaces that have been added. And this is how they're used now. These are the festivals, the Winterfell Festival, this Jazz Festival. This is all happening and sharing this common space. The Lewis Chessmen and Harvest Festival just finished. We tend to, when we look at a street, this is Lady Lane. It's literally, at the moment, it's a rat run through the city. We start to look at it and see where the individual spaces can be developed and the characters developed. The rat run has been taken out of it, it's all been repaved, and it's been totally transformed. This is just giving a sense of the clean public realm. This is actually how it's working out in reality. This is Henrietta Street. Now this street has just literally been done as we speak, and this is how it looks today. It's not finished, there's trees to go in and so on, but you can see the transformation. It has a sense of repose and sort of calmness that was not there with the traditional set out. This is John Roberts Square. This was done in 2000, and so again, taking the cars away, how do you recompose the space? And this is where knowing a little bit about the history of the city helps, because we wanted to keep it's all a balance of trying to keep the original the street, the openness of the Strand Street and Broad Street, which was outside the city wall and was traditionally a free-flowing area, yet giving some sense of enclosure to the triangle and creating a focal point. Eileen McDonough's sculpture there to create a centre for the city, because Waterford, there was never really a sort of identifiable centre, so we wanted to actually literally say that this, give a focal point. This is how it's used now and in Winterfell. Going back to the slide that I showed you at the beginning with the cars, and this is how it is today, just a bit, almost the same spot. Just various other examples, George's Street, and the orientating, reordering device here is just almost a medieval idea of the channel running down the centre of the street. This is Cathedral Square. Trees are often problematic in the city centre. We took a very a decision here just to remove the trees. This is the state of Cathedral Square as it was about 5 or 6 years ago, and this is it today. Here we've used a much softer material, gravel, valueless gravel, to give a much softer sense around the cathedral, and this is how it's used today. So bringing life and cultural, social, community activity back onto the streets. We tend to go to, this was a very historic building, very much changed. We tend to look back at the ways, how the street was maybe 100 years ago, and put back the way it is, put back something of the sort of sense of the street as it was. And the shop there in the corner, which wasn't in the region building, was in that photograph we put back, and is now it'll be opened in the next few weeks. That arch was a medieval walkway which we've opened up. This is Franciscan Friary, Greyfriars as it was, car parking. First of all, we cleaned up the street, took out all the railings, and this is how it was recently during Somerville, used for, I think they're obviously watching something on television there, bringing music back into the ruined Franciscan Friary there. The reenactors, the Viking reenactors. This is a car park just beside a very important 18th century building, the Bishop's Palace, and it's at the side. You can see how the car park's been turned into a pocket park. And I'll just skip on from that. That's an ESB. Again, reimagining, reinventing these public spaces. That's the way it was. New plaza, and that's the way it's being used now. Medieval museum. And this is a medieval undercroft which the museum was built over, and this is the way it is today. And there's a fluidity between outdoors and indoors. We try to break down those barriers. Also, where there's potential, always looking for potential. Reginald's Tower, one of the most historic buildings actually in the country, very inappropriately building beside it. We swapped, the council swapped this building, the owner, the building with the owner, and swapped it with a building in the council's ownership, removed it, and that's what's there today. And it catalysed private sector investment into the bar there that's opened up. Walking routes, it's a symptom of urban quality, so the degree of permeability. The grey lines were existing walking routes, and the orange ones are ones that have been added. And how this is panned out on the ground, there's Prey Quay facing onto the river, and you can see all the rubbish at the back there. This is the way it is today. And we intend to keep going and extend that walking route along the backs of these buildings, making the buildings double-faced, which increases their commercial viability and also improves the aspect which are facing south. Again, this is the medieval Chairman's Arch. Was blocked up for 100 years. Now it's social housing. The arch is opened up, and it's now an active walkway. We've kept the constant parallel material through all of these schemes. This scheme is going to happen shortly. It's starting on the ground, the Apple Market, by Duffy Henry Architects, and there's going to be a reflective canopy over the whole of the market. And also, in terms of linking any retail, new shopping centre, it's been designed such that it fits into this streetscape, and the public realm is seamless into the new. So rather than being like a spaceship landing into this medieval city centre, it seamlessly is incorporated into it. And looking to the future, there's still plenty of opportunities. This is positively sort of theatrical in its possibilities down the road. Materials, this is Dubrovnik. We've intentionally gone for extreme simplicity, which we think suits the complex urban spatial qualities of a medieval town. This is Broad Street, Baron Strand Street, and we've kept to actually a palette of only 2 or 3 materials: a Spanish granite, which was very carefully selected, and Carlow Kilkenny limestone. Quality, we're very, very keen on. We feel that because something is outside, it in no way should be done to a lesser quality than interior use. The quality of this pavement just outside the Waterford Crystal is superb. you could actually play billiards on it. And it has a sense of depth and timelessness, I think, that the drainage channel, that I think is one of the first things you look at when you're cleaning up the landscape, how the water is taken away, and it should be clearly articulated. This is can be done on other scales. The original paving of the city on the right-hand side there, and an interpretation on the left. Picking up on the, am I okay for time? 2 minutes, yeah. Looking, every city has a geology that is gives a sense of locality. We looked at the colours of the stones, the conglomerates, the metamorphic mudstones that are very characteristics of the southeast, and we carefully chose our materials that somehow match the sort of the temperament of the city, I suppose, in terms of its environment. This was just we feel it's important also for craftsmen sometimes to be commemorated, because ultimately the quality of the work is done by the craftsman. And we didn't tell this particular gentleman that we were doing this, but it's just a nice little touch. I'm nearly finished now. This just mobility, we feel, always should be looked at first. Very obvious in a large metropolitan area, not so obvious in a smaller town. We're looking at Tremor now, and the very first thing we're doing was we're looking at the transportation strategy, the mobility strategy, before we're starting to attempt to intervene in the streetscape. And this is a diagram of how the city centre in Waterford works with the concentric ring routes and parking around the centre, the core, such that we can pedestrianise and make pedestrian friendly, and public transport priority in the core. We want to stop rat running, which is this is a diagram showing rat running through the city centre. And now this is the way it's working now, that the destination traffic goes in and then loops back out, but you cannot transit the city centre. And that's the public transport system running through, also having priority through the city centre. This is how it's working out in reality. The outer ring, inner ring, and the city orbital, the parking around it. These are the neighbourhoods that are being seamlessly integrated. I think the point was made earlier about the different neighbourhoods, and we're using this common public realm to seamlessly integrate them. The last slide then, just some thoughts. You put a lot of effort into designing public space, but things will tend to, if they're not controlled, to poles and miscellaneous clutter tends to come back. Clarity of scale, parity of steam. So small things are as important as large. This design can be from you can have different ways of design, different designers. Doesn't matter as long as it's been done thoughtfully. Perfection not paramount. If you want perfection, nothing will ever be done. And the mobility plan first, and we're trying to build identity is where we're coming from. Thanks.
Thank you very much.